This is WWE superstar Drew McIntyre, and you're listening to the WWE Podcast.
The champ is
the one that everybody wants, me.
It's going to WrestleMania. Claymore!
Austin 316 says I just whipped your ass. This is my iron. You're gonna acknowledge me.
What's going on, everybody? Guys and girls, welcome back to another edition of the SmackDown review right here on the WWE Podcast. As always, I am the host of this show, Michael Ritter. You can find me on X at Michael5Ritter, on Instagram at MichaelRitter5, and also the host of the Football Function Podcast, available on all of your podcasting platforms, including on Patreon if you prefer an ad-free listening experience. So, let's talk about the elephant in the room, huh? This, as you should know by now, some of you, if you've listened to the Raw review or the mailbag, you should know by now that this is going to be my final show here on the WWE Podcast. Definitely a bittersweet feeling. Very tough decision. I'll get into it here in just a little bit. It's also my 200th, which is a very special, very monumental milestone that I'm very proud of here on the WWE Podcast, strictly because, you know, on the Football Function and other podcasts, whenever they're counting up their episodes, you know, they drop more than one a week. So I'm usually dishing out 2 to 3 episodes of the Football Function Podcast every single week. That's why we've been able to already hit our, 522 milestone is what we're at right now. We're 522 episodes. See, on the WWE Podcast, it's once a week. So this is 200 weeks that I've been doing this show, which is a long time. And also, I don't count the weeks that I didn't do. Like the weeks that Grim Reaper had to fill in for me, or other people in the past. There's been multiple people that have filled in and hosted the SmackDown review for me. Just whether it's, been a time where I have COVID, which is back in January of 2021. And then, times that I've gone out of town and I just wasn't available schedule-wise to do it. I don't count those weeks. So this is literally my 200th SmackDown review here on the WWE Podcast. And like I said, definitely something that I'm proud of. Being a part of the WWE Podcast family for the past 4 years in of itself is something that I'm extremely proud of. I mean, I definitely wave the flag, still believe that you put our team up against anybody, any other podcast out there, and we'll be able to hold our own. Just whether it's the various voices, the different opinions that come on here, the depth of the shows that they go into, the amount of shows. There's a lot of things that Matt does really well to make this such a formidable platform, a credible platform. Like, I don't care if you like it, if you don't like it. You can't deny the sheer number of people, the sheer volume that, is attracted to this show, and the people that have been here for years and years. I'm talking about hosts, co-hosts, listeners. There's a lot of listeners that I met over the course of these 4 years that I'm going to continue to be, involved in the projects that they do, following them on social media. Obviously, I'm still going to be a listener here on the WWE Podcast. Like, I'm not going anywhere in that aspect. It just so happens that, things change. Your schedule changes. Whenever I started this podcast back in October of 2020, or whenever I started doing it is how I should phrase that. Whenever I took over the SmackDown review back in October of 2020, I was 26 years old. I wasn't single, but I didn't, I wasn't in a very serious relationship at the time. And, my schedule was pretty much wide open. I didn't have the Football Function or anything like that. And it was easy to just spend so much time and just have so much of my Friday night dedicated to the SmackDown review. And now, fast forward 4 years later, a lot of things have changed. The relationship I'm in is very serious, and now obviously I have a stepson that is 6 years old. He was only 2 years old at the time whenever I started doing this, so now things are a little bit different, and mainly me being directly responsible for him on Friday nights, Saturday mornings, typically my dedicated time to the SmackDown review. So whenever that wrench got thrown into the plans in terms of, my weekly schedule, I knew, okay, this is going to be a little bit difficult to get out, but we were still doing it for several months. I was able to get the SmackDown review out. There's been a couple times whenever he was out here, but as Matt said himself, and as I'm well aware of, this is a very timely operation. Like, you can't drop a SmackDown review on Monday and just expect it to get the same amount of downloads, expect it to get taken serious, or even just be relevant by then. By then a whole Monday Night Raw has happened. And I took a lot of pride in getting this show out very quickly to Matt on a weekly basis. Especially at the very beginning, I would, start watching SmackDown at 7 o'clock. Well, that's whenever it comes on, Central Time Zone where I am. And I would pause it in between segments. I would pause it, rewind it if I needed to see something. And I would just put so much effort into watching the show. And then immediately after I watched this 2-hour show, which ended up being a lot longer than 2 hours, because whenever you're watching it live, you don't have the luxury of fast forwarding the commercials, which can shrink and shorten the amount of time that, you're spending on each episode. But whenever you're watching it live, you have to do the full 2 hours, and then any type of rewinding or any type of pauses that you have to take for notes. I was typically finishing each episode of SmackDown around 2.5 hours, and then I would go into recording. And keep in mind, at the very beginning, I was very raw, very green at this. Didn't have a lot of knowledge, no previous experiences. This is my introduction to podcasting, so I was learning on the fly every single week. And sometimes those episodes took 2.5 hours for me to finish, just simply a 35 to 40 minute recording, just because editing comes into it. Like, I would listen to my show immediately after, and I would make sure, okay, is there any things I need to take out here? Is there any mistakes, any type of audio issues? I wanted to make sure that it was a polished product before I sent it to Matt. Now, once I got more polished myself, and once I got the experience and I got truly better at the craft, I was able to knock it out on one take, knock it out just live every single week. And there was even a period where me and my co-host John Carrasco were recording these bad boys live as we were watching SmackDown. And that was a fun era in of itself too. But that's really what it boils down to, is just eras and chapters. And the fact that, like I mentioned, this was my very first introduction to podcasting. I wanted to start a football podcast back in spring of 2020. I bought some equipment. I had a computer, but I didn't have a proper recording area. I didn't have the knowledge. I didn't have the skill, just as putting it blank, or as direct as I can. I wasn't good enough to start a podcast then. So pretty much the studio equipment collected dust for months and months. That entire summer of 2020, I was thinking, man, I'd like to come out of the pandemic with some type of, something to show for it. Like, give me a podcast or something. Let me do something to where it feels like I'm putting this ambition to use, because that's really what it boiled down to. I knew that once, I was listening to podcasts, including Matt's, for 2-3 years before I actually got the urge and the, the courage to pursue something like that. But I knew it was something that I really wanted to do. And then October rolls around in 2020, and Matt puts out a casting call similar to what he just did this week, saying, hey, I need a host for the SmackDown review. So I sent him, my pitch. Like, hey, I would really be interested in this. I have the equipment to do it. I really love wrestling. I watch it every single week. And he said, okay, well, this was on a Friday. Watch this episode of SmackDown, record it, and send me your recording. Pretty much like an audition tape, ultimately. So I did that exact thing. And he said, okay, well, hey, is it fine is it all right if I air this? Like, can I publish this episode? And I was like, oh, man, like, I thought only you were going to listen to this. But sure, go ahead. If that's what it takes to get me this gig, I'm more than willing to do that. And he posted it. He wanted to see what type of feedback he got. At the time, I think he got some pretty good feedback in return. And he was able to say, hey, the opportunity is yours. If you want it, you can start up immediately. This was Sunday, right? The Friday was October 2nd, 2020. Sunday, whenever Matt got back to me, he emailed me and pretty much told me that, hey, if I wanted to do the SmackDown review, that I could. And that was October 4th. And that is whenever I truly feel like that crappy era of the pandemic, when you really just, it seemed like you couldn't see the light at the end of the tunnel. You didn't know when it was going to end. Life as we knew it pretty much had been flipped upside down. That moment right there is where I saw the light at the end of the tunnel. I felt like, okay, I took a huge step forward here, and it was so fun. Literally every single week, being able to record the SmackDown review and being able to watch it and talk to people and meet new people every single week, and people come follow me on social media and tell me their thoughts and things like that. That was a really fun, introduction into this whole thing. And then obviously, time goes on, I get better at this. I feel like I'm starting to get more comfortable. So March 2021 rolls around, almost exactly a year later, whenever I bought all my equipment originally and just put it up and it was collecting dust. I finally launched my own podcast, The Football Function. And without a doubt, no question about it, I would not have been able to do that without the WWE Podcast, without the SmackDown review, and specifically without Matt. And that kind of turns my attention to Matt, because I do have to give him the biggest of thank yous. I do feel like I'm forever indebted to him because of the insight, the advice, the tips that he gave me along the way, the opportunity, right there. We could start there. Four straight years, Matt gave me the opportunity of turning my microphone on, speaking into it, and recording SmackDown, reviewing SmackDown and putting it on his platform that he works extremely hard to build and keep relevant day in, day out. He allowed me to be on that platform, and I did not take that lightly. I didn't take it for granted, because I truly, I truly felt like it was an honor being a part of this WWE podcast family. And I know that there wasn't always great reviews. I saw some negative reviews with my own eyes of the SmackDown review back, in the summer of 2023, and even, I guess maybe even spring of 2023. I'm not really sure exactly when it was. That doesn't matter. But all I'm saying is Matt could have very easily said, man, we're getting some negative feedback here. Let me kick this guy to the curb and start fresh. So if I do a casting call, obviously I'm going to get a bunch of people immediately show me their interest in recording and joining this team. So he could have easily done that a year ago, 2 years ago. The fact that I get to end on my own terms, I'm extremely proud of, because I'm extremely proud of the work that I did in being a part of this. I didn't want to let the listeners down. I didn't want to be the weak link in the chain. I always talked about it being at the end of the week on a Friday. I felt like I was the fourth leg on the relay. Like I was on the relay team, and it was up to me to bring it home, to send the listeners into the weekend, whether it was a pay-per-view coming up or something like that. I always loved those go-home shows. That was one of my favorite parts. But as my schedule got just a little bit too much towards the end of the week, and I had to move, and my internet took forever to get connected, and I was already struggling to find the time, it kind of hit me at some point that I don't want the show to hurt from this. I don't want my, lack of time to maybe put out the best and most quality SmackDown review that I've ever done. I don't want that to be, what makes the show take a step back. So I started to ask myself, is it time? Is it time for me to pass the torch? Would it just organically be right with 200 coming up, my 200th episode, to just allow the show to get a breath of fresh air, a new voice, different perspectives on the product? I feel like that's going to be beneficial in of itself. It's going to allow the show to have that new feeling. And I have a feeling it's going to be in great hands. It's going to start next week. Madison Square Garden. Are you kidding me? What better place to start you covering the SmackDown review than a show that aired at the Garden? That just seems like, a little bit of poetic justice in of itself, because I'll be honest, guys, I just kind of told you none of the things that I'm doing now podcast wise, content creation, would be possible without the WWE Podcast. And I feel like it's time for somebody else's dreams to come true. I was thankful to use this platform as a springboard to get me to where I needed to be, confidence wise, experience wise, let my craft develop on the job, not just sitting here recording stuff and not publishing it. No, the WWE Podcast is a platform, and it has a following and listeners, and it's literally like a family. And I didn't want to be the one that, to let that family down, which is what led to this decision. But now I really feel like it's time for somebody else to get an opportunity to wave the flag. Allow them to step in this seat and, let their ambitions of being a podcast host, they probably thought about it just like me. I'm not the only person that has these dreams, So why not give another person the opportunity to let their dreams flourish? And I think that that's a great thing to do here. Like I said, it's kind of just an organic spot where I am in life, where my life is kind of, gotten to by itself. And then with 200 coming up, it just, it's a round perfect number. It just seems like it's, it's a milestone. And WWE is about to get great, guys. Like, trust me, this isn't an easy decision by any means. Like, it took me about 4 or 5 weeks to actually put the thought into, words to somebody. I reached out to Grim Reaper, who obviously has covered for me several times. He didn't want me to go. I kind of just told him, like, hey, would you be interested in filling in for me? Would you be interested in taking the torch yourself? And he was ready and willing to do that. Matt, just obviously, this being his product, he wanted to take a chance to, hey, the SmackDown review hasn't been open in 4 years. I kind of want to just, before we just say, okay, here's what we're going to do with it, he wanted to take a step back and look at the landscape. And obviously, Grim Reaper, he's a member of the Football Function recording team as well. So there's more than just a review show that he's capable of doing. So I'm more than confident that he can get something going here on the WWE podcast. But I kind of, it took me a while to reach out to him and say, hey, like, would you be willing to do this if I stepped away? And he was like, man, I would hate to, lose you on the SmackDown review, but, you got to do what you got to do. And yes, I'd be honored to take over. And that's what I feel like that's how a lot of people feel about this, is they would probably be honored to have this opportunity. And that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to give somebody else that opportunity and let this show just keep on rolling like it always has. It was here before I got here, and it's going to be here long after me, obviously. And I'm going to be a listener. Like I said, I'm not going anywhere. I've been trying to get on the Wrestle Magic show for several weeks now. Just like I said, the schedule thing is not an exaggeration. It's really hard to get on another show and make my schedule match with somebody else's, because it's hard enough getting my schedule to match by myself, just for me to allow myself to record. But nonetheless, guys, I just wanted to I know it's a little bit of a lengthy open here. I do apologize about that for those of you who could care less and you're just ready to get into the SmackDown review. I totally understand that, and we will get there. I just had to, in a sense, explain this kind of abrupt exit from this team. I wanted to elaborate a little bit, provide you guys some context as to why that decision was made. And, this wasn't easy. I have a lot of thoughts, a lot of feelings, a lot of emotions whenever it comes to this. I'm very proud of it. And the fact that I'm about to record my last one, it does feel a little bit bittersweet. Like, I'm not excited to leave the WWE podcast. I just know that this is something that for all parties kind of has to happen. But before we get there, we have one more dance. So let's go ahead and do this bad boy. Let's review the SmackDown that aired on June 21st, 2024 from Chicago, Illinois. Location breakdown brought to you by none other than our guy DJ Kuzmo. And this show opened with the hometown boy, CM Punk. He comes out and he talks about live TV and speaking in front of a crowd, his hometown specifically, but just a large crowd in general. He's talking about how that just by default can provide a lot of pressure. And then he references July 17th, 2011, when he guaranteed he'd win the WWE Championship, and that put the pressure on himself. And then he talks about Drew McIntyre over the last few months, kicking him whenever he was down, whenever he had his triceps injury. Drew McIntyre was always the first person to poke fun and to laugh and spit on the grave of CM Punk and his return here in the WWE. This was a very Chicago-centric promo. That's one thing I will say. It was a lot of references, a lot of getting the crowd involved. You could tell they really appreciated that, and they were taking every opportunity they got to, let CM Punk know that they had his back. But CM Punk, he says that he set out to kill Drew's career. He just didn't expect it to be that easy. And then he calls out Drew for quitting on Monday Night Raw, essentially taking his ball and going home because he could not handle that pressure. And that's whenever Paul Heyman surprisingly comes out, but not so surprisingly gives a lot of praise to CM Punk and ultimately gives him a hug. The crowd was really into this segment. You could tell that they were, digging it. A lot of them were on their feet. But Paul Heyman mentions their ride to the arena. He mentions the local radio station, pretty much the local sports radio, saying that this is CM Punk's town. And Solo didn't like that. Heyman reluctantly says that it's because Solo is the head of the table, and every town should be his town. He then warns CM Punk to get the hell out of here before the quote-unquote bloodline comes out, and obviously CM Punk thinks that's hilarious. And on cue, out come Solo and the Tongans. Solo demands respect from CM Punk if he wants to, quote-unquote, be on his show in his city. And if he doesn't, they're going to make sure that he never gets cleared. Heyman says, quote-unquote, take me with you to Punk. I thought that was a little bit weird. Definitely gets referenced a little bit later in the show by Solo. We'll see how that unfolds in the coming weeks. But I thought that was a little bit strange for him to say on the microphone, right there in front of Solo. That just pretty much tells you exactly how desperate he is to get out of this situation. But anyway, CM Punk then fakes out everybody by putting his one up and saying he acknowledges that this isn't the bloodline standing in front of him. It's just a fake tribal chief with some crazy Samoans. Of course, they try to respond physically, 3-on-1, but Cody Rhodes shows up in the nick of time with baseball bats, and as you'd expect, the bloodline run away. Cody says to Solo, quote-unquote, you think you're the head of the table, right? Well, I already beat one head of the table. The crowd loves that. They go crazy. And then he challenges him to a match tonight with nobody else. No KO, no Randy Orton, no Tongans, nobody. And Solo accepts. This was probably Solo's best segment, and I will say, he didn't speak a lot, so it's not like he cut some monumental, groundbreaking promo or anything like that. I just really think that he was in his element, and this is where it felt the most authentic. It could be the Punk effect. Paul Heyman came out there. This felt like a special segment, and shout out to SmackDown. Like, the fact that this is not only episode 200, but the fact that it's my last show, and I feel like they gave me a pretty good one to go out with. I definitely appreciate that. This wasn't a Mojo Rawley or a Retribution type of segment or anything like that. Like, this is a really good quality show, and I just appreciate that a little bit from WWE. But anyways, up next we get a Money in the Bank qualifying match, a triple threat. All of the Money in the Bank qualifying matches are triple threats, just so you know. But Bianca versus Chelsea versus Michin. Michin looks almost unrecognizable, I will say. She has new gear and pigtails. I don't know if she's lost a little bit of weight too. I have no idea, but I can tell you that she definitely looked a little bit different and, like I said, almost unrecognizable. Bianca does a pretty big German suplex to Michin. Almost looks a little bit botched. Michin lands on her head, but it looked like something from Brock Lesnar circa 2002 when he was just launching people, like launching the Hardys across the ring. That feud when it was like 2-on-1, and he was just dismantling them on a weekly basis. But, like I said, Bianca does a huge German suplex to Michin. Follows up with a KOD, but Chelsea throws Bianca out of the ring and steals the win. Not a very good week for Bianca if you talk about her not getting pinned either time, but losing two very important matches. Triple threat tag team championship match, obviously at Clash at the Castle. She doesn't get pinned, her team doesn't get pinned, but yet they still lose their titles. And then just 6 days later, she loses a Money in the Bank qualifying match in a triple threat format. Same stipulation. She's not the one that gets pinned, but hey, they will remind you every chance they get. That is why triple threats are very risky. Up next, taking things backstage, Solo calls out Paul Heyman for his comments, and he says that they have to have a talk. Like I said, he's going to pay for those take me with you comments that he made to CM Punk. It's just a matter of when and exactly what his punishment is going to be. Let's see here. We get a backstage interview with Kayla Braxton and timeout. Kayla Braxton's leaving WWE too. Next week is going to be her final show. So 8 years with the company. I'll give her a salute. She did some great work with her backstage interviews. I felt like she did add quality to the show. Her little dynamic with Paul Heyman was always fun on the SmackDown Lowdown or whatever that show was called. SmackDown Recap, whatever the hell it was. But you get what I'm saying. I feel like she did a really good job in that capacity. And who knows where she's going to go. It always sucks whenever we lose those backstage interviewers. They're really good ones. Renee Young, obviously. Charlie Arnault. What was her name whenever she was here, though? Charlie. I forgot her name. You know what I'm trying to say, though. Charlie. I know you remember her. And obviously Kayla Braxton. Hopefully we do not lose Kathy Kelly. I know we technically already did once, but they brought her back. Hopefully they pay her enough to where, even if her friends are leaving, she will stay. Samantha Irvin, I know they're pretty close. Samantha Irvin's fiance, Ricochet, just left the company. This is always tricky. This always gets kind of sticky with relationships. And it's why I imagine the upper management probably hates whenever they hear that people are in a relationship in the company. But like I said, this was a backstage interview. Kayla Braxton and Grayson Waller. It was interrupted by DIY and then loud bangs on the garage door outside of the building, which ends up being Drew McIntyre and a bloody, beaten CM Punk. I love the way that the production team shot this. It's pretty much just the slow rise of the garage and seeing CM Punk laying there bloody, and then you just get a slow reveal that it's Drew McIntyre, and then Drew carries him on his shoulders through Gorilla all the way to the stage without a single camera cut, just one shot the entire way. I thought that was well done. And then he just drops him from well over 6 feet and steals his bracelet. That's very meaningful to him. Nick Aldis comes out and gets into a little bit of a shoving match with Drew McIntyre. I thought that was a wild scene, the way he shoved Drew shoved him back. Like, is he going to get fined? What's the situation there? I can't even remember if Drew McIntyre is on SmackDown or not, so this is kind of muddy at the moment, but nonetheless entertaining, and that's all I could ask for at this point. Up next, we get a Money in the Bank qualifying match. Another triple threat, Randy Orton versus Tama Tonga versus Carmelo Hayes. A long match that was all over the place. Ends with a roll-up from Hayes after taking advantage of a distracted Randy Orton, because one of the other Tongans came out, and then Kevin Owens came out. They were brawling on the outside of the ring. That drew Randy Orton's attention, and Carmelo Hayes capitalized, got a roll-up win. And, it almost looked like quicker than 3 seconds with how fast the camera got there, and the match was over. So Carmelo Hayes earns his spot in the Money in the Bank ladder match, and we'll see if he has an opportunity to win it. It's usually for a heel. He is a heel, so it makes sense, but I still have my doubts if he's ready for something like that. But up next, LA Knight comes out. He calls out Logan Paul, but he actually ends up getting Santos Escobar instead. And as he's attempting to just brush him off, Santos cheap shots LA Knight, but then still gets dropped. And of course, out comes Logan Paul, and he hits him with a knockout punch. So I'm not really sure what you guys think about this Logan Paul LA Knight stuff, but they are starting to get involved with each other more and more often. So that tells you that SummerSlam, you could just bet your bottom dollar that United States Championship is going to be on the line. You could see them doing it Money in the Bank, but I feel like with the U.S. title, especially with it being 2 nights, why not just do it now? Or I'm sorry, why not just do it at SummerSlam and, just forget it? I feel like that's a juicy enough matchup where it's worthy of being on the card, and it's just a matter of you making it stretch out from now to then. And I think that with Logan Paul and the way that he kind of comes and goes, it would be relatively easy for WWE to, to get this done. But continuing on here in the show, we get another Money in the Bank qualifying match. Kevin Owens versus Grayson Waller versus Andrade. The Tongans attack Kevin Owens from behind as he's making his entrance. I thought that was going to just screw him out of his opportunity. But luckily, he still makes his way to the ring. He tries as hard as he can. I mean, they both go at him once the match starts, or Grayson Waller does at least. He makes an effort to just eliminate Kevin Owens from the match. And Kevin Owens still does relatively well for the circumstances, but at the very end, Grayson Waller pulls him out of the ring and, attempts to do his finishing move on Andrade, and he actually reverses it and counters it into some type of move. I'm not really sure exactly what it was, but he was able to get the job done and get the win, which is really all that mattered at that point. So Andrade and Carmelo Hayes earned their spot in the Money in the Bank ladder match. And after this match was over, after the commercial break, I should say, WWE, as they've done every single year for God knows how long, they have given a WWE Championship belt to sports teams that win the championship, in the 4 major sports. And I believe, not 100% sure, someone may have to correct me on this, but I believe the NBA Finals just ended not that long ago. And I can't remember the team that won. Someone's going to have to, freshen up my memory on that. I'm not really sure who. So, yeah, if somebody wants to bring that to my attention, I would really appreciate it. But the NBA champion got their WWE Championship belt. And, credit to them, whoever that team is. Shout out for winning your 18th NBA Finals. But either way, let's go ahead and move on here to Tiffany Stratton and Meechin having a little bit of a backstage exchange. Meechin slaps the taste out of her mouth. And Nia Jax comes up and pretty much just takes care of Tiffany's light work. Not really sure what to think about that, other than Tiffany kind of had it coming in terms of her getting slapped, but Nia Jax, she's just a big bully. You know, she's going to walk around and just do that. I mean, she really didn't do anything too crazy. She just pretty much did like a little running splash like you would do to somebody if they were in the turnbuckle, but she just did it to Michin as she was standing there. So, yeah, I guess credit to Nia Jax. She's an unstoppable force right now, if you want to call her that. Up next, Solo Sikoa says that Roman Reigns is not coming back. I thought that was strange, a weird comment. We'll see if that is actually true or not. Obviously, it's not true, but that just tells you where Solo is. And whenever Roman Reigns does eventually come back, you could expect that there's going to be some pretty strong words that he has with Solo Sikoa. But speaking of Solo, he has a one-on-one match with Cody Rhodes here as the main event. It does not go on long, though. Ends extremely quick after a bloodline interruption and interference caused a disqualification. And to even out the number odds and, you know, make this a 3-on-3, Kevin Owens and Randy Orton come out to help. And then insert Jacob Fatu. A brutal beatdown. Cody ends up going through a table thanks to a frog splash from Jacob Fatu off of the turnbuckle. This was just, you know, Shane McMahon-esque. Put him right through the table. A hell of an introduction to probably the most dangerous man in the bloodline and arguably in the WWE right now. Go do your research on Jacob Fatu. He's been long awaited to come to the WWE, but people wondered if he would actually get to come because he's not your typical Oos. We'll just say that. You know, you definitely want to get a load of this guy if you haven't yet. And I think that it could be a pretty good member in this bloodline because, you know, as you guys know, I'm not really too sold on this version of it, so I'm not necessarily thinking that this is going to be an extremely dominant faction, although now that they have Jacob Fatu, you could expect that it's going to be, you know, at the very least, a very tough team to beat. So I guess we'll see kind of how they develop what happens there with this new version of the bloodline. If we're going to get mic time, right now I don't think that any of the people in that bloodline can, you know, cut a promo to save their life. So we will hopefully get a little bit more of a look at that, I guess, if that's what you want. Because, I mean, they can't just beat the hell out of people without talking. Solo can't be the only person cutting promos every single week. But I guess we'll, you know, just let them play it out. But, guys, that does it for me here on the SmackDown review. My final show. The time has come to say goodbye. Definitely not easy. I'm definitely going to miss you guys. I'm going to miss doing this every single week. It's something that it took me a little bit to actually hit record. You know, I was studying my notes. I was kind of just looking over what happened on the show, and I was like, man, I really don't want to. I kind of got those butterflies that I used to get, that nervousness before hitting record that I used to get whenever I first started. And, you know, that was a pretty cool feeling, but, you know, I'm definitely reluctantly letting this go. But it has to happen, and I'm looking forward to seeing where the show goes from here. I'm still going to be a listener, like I said. I'm not going to just disappear from the WWE Podcast world, but, you know, I'm definitely going to be making my appearances a little bit more spaced out. So, I guess we'll see. I'll see you guys when I see you. But outside of that, just, you know, still support the football function if that's something that you're into. I'm not going to be able to plug it anymore on this show. So hopefully you guys that have come around, you know, guys like Howard Poole, guys like Double J, Detroit Kyle, DJ Kuzmo, obviously the casual wrestling fan, Kanye Twitty, Frankie Graham. A lot of different guys have made their appearances on the show, and hopefully I'll get more people coming on over because that's somewhere that you could still hear me if you know, are interested in my podcasting endeavors. But one more time, guys, thank you so much for allowing me to be part of your wrestling coverage for the last 4 years. Thank you for making me part of your weekly, daily, whatever experience that you, you know, that you listen to the show on. You know, I appreciate being part of your routine in one way or another, and I definitely didn't take it for granted. But with all that being said, guys, continue to walk passionately in the direction of your dreams, and I'll talk to you soon.
Thanks for listening to the WWE Podcast. Don't forget to subscribe on your favorite podcast app so you don't miss a show, or head to WWEpodcast.com. And for all of these shows ad-free, head over to patreon.com/WWE Podcast. Until then, we'll see you next time.